for those that don't know me, I'm Kwadwo Kyeremanteng, and I just found out Carl was a fellow Prairie boy, which I often have an affiliation. I feel like we're from a different cloth, you know what I'm saying? So just wanted to say thanks for everything, Carl, and thanks for inviting me. I am really excited to talk to you about this talk. I think the name of the talk was Embracing Change and Innovation, our attempts for solving healthcare. But as I was writing it and as I was going over the material, realistically, I want everyone out there to see their potential for creating change, for creating innovation, because these are special times, and we've seen in the last few months over the pandemic how innovation has really changed things in healthcare. We've embraced things that we haven't embraced before, and there's tons of opportunity. And so I think amongst all of you guys out there, I think there's a lot of potential within you to create that change. And so what we'll talk about here, actually, before I move on, sorry, hold on there first. There we go. Before I move on, I will say just a couple disclosures. So I am a medical advisor for Edwards Life Sciences, a critical care company, and I also get a salary for Trillium Gift of Life, which is our organ donation group in Ontario. So I'll just let you guys read this disclosure of financial support. This programs not receive financial support from any for-profit organization. As this great organization, the Sean Hospice Palliative Care Program, they're mitigating potential bias. Yeah, I've been told to let this percolate there for a second. Okay, so what we'll talk about is why solving healthcare was created. So I should take a step back. So yes, we're talking about creating change. I think I've been invited for this talk. For people that don't know me, I host a podcast, Solving Healthcare. I'm an intensive care doctor, and I'm also a palliative care doctor at the Ottawa Hospital and at the Montfort Hospital. And so Solving Healthcare started about just over a year ago, and has created a ton of opportunities. Has led to some innovation, some good changes within our community. So I think this is what was the reason why you're hearing me talk today. So we'll talk about why it was created, what changes it created, what's new and up and coming in the future, what lessons we've learned so far a year into producing a podcast, and then what I'll challenge you guys to think about is determining barriers to change within healthcare, how we overcome those barriers, and lastly, we'll talk about ways outside of academia to amplify your message or goals, because I think this is another thing that the pandemic has taught us is there's other ways of spreading knowledge, whether it's research or for quality initiatives or innovation that are outside of, research papers. So we'll talk about that as well. So the journey, how did solving healthcare get created? How did it, how did we land here? And I'll start with this, I will call him DJ. I was a young, believe it or not, young trainee, and I was taking care of DJ. He's in his mid-20s, got into a bad car accident, left him paraplegic, chest injury, needing to be on a ventilator, needing a tracheostomy to allow us to start getting him better. And he was extremely reliant on chest physiotherapy to allow him to breathe better, to allow him to bring up his secretions. And this was a time where healthcare cuts were obviously, and one of the cuts that we were seeing was to allied health, including physiotherapy. And then we go into a long weekend. DJ's doing awesome. He's able to get outside the ICU, but in the ward that he's at, they don't have access to physiotherapy on the weekend. So what happens? He gets a mucus plug. He can no longer breathe on his own. He needs to come down to the ICU, put on a ventilator again, and all that work leads to 3 weeks of recurrence of trying to get him off of vents, new pneumonia, more struggle, more weakness, and all because of the short-sightedness that we had, that cutting our physiotherapist is going to save our bottom line. When ultimately, when it comes to DJ himself, when it comes to the long-term costs, this is a mistake. And so when I saw this, and we all do this in healthcare all the time, that these trying to balance these budgets from a year-to-year basis. But when I saw this, I was like, we need to do better. This is too short-sighted. There's so many inefficiencies in healthcare. We need to look at ways that we can either illustrate where the problems are and better serve our patients, just like DJ. All right, then we have Mrs. Ethel. And these are all fake names, obviously, just in case, because this is, going out in the cyber world. Miss Ethel, she is 93 years old. She is from a long-term care facility. She has dementia, COPD, coronary artery disease, end-stage or near end-stage renal disease, severe dementia, doesn't recognize her family, and had previous documentation that she would not want to be transferred outside of long-term care. But this documentation hasn't been updated in a while. And she's showing signs and symptoms of an infection in her long-term care facility. She's having a tough time breathing. The nurse at the staff at the long-term care tries to get a hold of family. They can't get a hold of family, so they decide to bring her into hospital at 3 in the morning. The emerge doc doesn't have any documentation, so intubates Mrs. Ethel, comes to the ICU. She gets a central line, she gets a Foley catheter, she gets an ART line, she gets suction, she gets all these invasive measures, when in fact, she never wanted any of this. Documented before, but because of our inability to address it, or ability to forecast some of these things, she has gone through the system, cost the system millions of dollars or thousands of dollars, and has gone through for no purpose. And I know you guys think, hey, how could this happen? But those in healthcare, I know you've seen this happen. And this is another opportunity where I'm like, we need to do better. We need to think outside the box in ways that the Mrs. Ethels of the world doesn't need to come to our intensive care unit, doesn't need to come to our hospital, doesn't need to come into our emergency rooms. All right, lastly, we got Larry the cable guy. He's in his 50s. He is attempting to change or put up his Christmas lights, and he falls off a ladder and has a significant brain bleed. And Larry, being in his 50s and healthy, has never had conversations with his loved ones about what he would want if he was unable to be the same person or have severe disability. Larry ends up in ICU for 3 months, trachs, complication after complication, and has a slow, painful death. And once again, family, himself, never been encouraged to talk about, hey, what would we want if we were unable to care for ourselves, if we had severe disability, unable to recognize family. And so once again, this opportunity where, as a society, as you know, we need to have these important conversations, and these are the reasons why. Not only because we want to reduce suffering, not only because we want to not put patients through any undue harm, and also just to be more efficient with our resources, provide care for patients where we could achieve their goals. So why do I tell you all this? Because of all these years of going through and seeing these, I ask myself, what can we do to make this better? What can we do to address this? And so we created a resource optimization network. And it was a research initiative that we basically were looking at ways to improve quality of care and at the same time decrease spending. How can we be more efficient with our healthcare dollars? How can we make healthcare more sustainable? So who did we lean on? We found docs, we found nurses, we found health economists, we found members from Tuffer School of Management, and we focused on end-of-life care and critical care, and we hustled. From 2010 onwards, we produced, say, about 20 papers a year, because you know what? We wanted to create change. We wanted to be able to really make a difference in healthcare. And the profile we did was we wanted to review what's out there. We wanted to quantify how much spending, where our spending could be done better, and then intervene. And what we found is, despite these papers and high-profile papers or high-profile journals and all stuff, nothing was changing. Nothing. And because of this, Solvent Healthcare podcast. But before we go there, I want to give you guys a chance to show off your skills. Carl encouraged me, thank you, Carl, to ask you guys some questions. So one thing that is extremely clear is, within healthcare, we have no idea how much stuff costs. And so I thought I would ask you guys some simple questions. I don't know if it's a simple question, but we'll test out the audience a little bit here. So in terms of the average ICU cost per day, what do we think? A, $3,500 a day, B, $1,500 a day, C, $2,000 a day, D, $1,000 a day. I'll get my Vanna White music. It's not Vanna White. It's I guess it would be kind of Jeopardy music. Rest in peace, Alex Trebek. That was quite sad, actually. So yeah, you can put your flavor in the chat box if you want to take a shot. I'm just gonna peek at some of these numbers. Oh yeah, I see you guys. Oh yeah, I'll go ahead and say most of you guys appear to be wrong so far. This is so much fun. Okay, so the correct answer is dun 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 dun. You guys must be excited about this. Dun 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 dun. Oops. Oh, wrong way. There we go. It's very delicate. Sorry, guys. Don't know what it. Sorry. The answer. I don't know what's going on with my mouse there, but the answer is $3,500 a day, average, between $3,000 and $4,000 a day, and so that's a lot of money. And so when I think of Miss Ethel, who once again did not want to enter the intensive care unit, didn't want to enter the hospital, you get a sense of how much one person could represent a lot of money. And the other thing when it comes to cost, like I know people frown on talking about money, but I just want to say that there's the concept of opportunity cost. So when you put money into something like think of money as a budget that's fixed. Like there's not an endless supply of money. And so if you are providing care for Miss Ethel, maybe there's missed opportunity on funding that physiotherapy full-time, funding, for example, that social worker full-time in our ICU. Not what you think would be common in most tertiary ICUs, but this is not the case. Like I could speak for myself that there's been a period of time where we haven't had a full-time social worker in an intensive care unit or full-time access to spiritual care, and like in times where they're needed tremendously. So when we think about cost, also think about what are we missing out on? What are the opportunity costs? Okay, I think this is we got one more question before we're talking about stuff. So how much is the first date in the intensive care unit? And what I want you to think about when it comes to why is the first date more? You get all your diagnostic tests. You get more consultants. Especially if they get more procedures done on that first day. So once again, Miss Ethel when she walked through the door, this will be her busiest day in terms of her admission. So what do we think in terms of the cost? Give you guys a couple seconds. Do a little do 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 do. All right, I'm loving it. Carl, I'm glad we did this. Actually, I'm glad we did this.
Yeah, absolutely. It's really fun.
there's more to come. All right, we're gonna show off these answers. Hopefully, this works better than last time. Oops, this didn't work again. Sorry, guys. It's 8,500 is the amount, the average of between $7,000 and $10,000. You'll see cited in most journals when it comes to the day one of your intensive care unit. And once again, think of the opportunity cost. I have a colleague, I don't know if any of you guys know Mike Harwick. I think I saw Jill Rice in the audience, so I think you know, yeah, obviously you know Mikey. I remember him telling me they had this wonderful breakfast program at his school where the kids were having tougher times making meat. Their families got access to free breakfast in the morning, and the school was shutting down, the program was shutting down. And I was like, Mikey, that's horrific. Like, what's going on there? And they're short. And I said, Mikey, did you get a sense of how much they're short? And they said $980 some or close to $1,000. And I was like, what? That is ludicrous. We'll bring in the Miss Ethels of the world, not getting the care that she never would want. It's mind-boggling. It's mind-boggling that we could just throw money in areas that aren't beneficial to our patients, not able to achieve their goals, and meanwhile we can't feed kids. Like we got to do better. Just a couple of sense of stuff we've been able to illustrate with our study. So this is a study that we did looking at patients that have an in-hospital cardiac arrest. So you're in hospital and you die, and then we try and revive you. We looked at patients that had clear evidence of frailty and compared them to those that did not have frailty. So to save one person with a high level of frailty costs almost $1 million. And we don't talk about this. We talk about frailty, but do we talk about having a frail patient arrest in anywhere in a hospital? When you look at that, $1 million per life saved. And this is not telling you anything about their quality of life after. This is just if they survive, okay? We've been able to illustrate this, and once again, do you ask me if anything has changed much? I would beg to differ. One of the other studies we showed, this was from the Ottawa Hospital data actually. We looked at patients that were terminal, had an end-stage cancer, and within their last 2 weeks of life, we looked at those came into the emergency department. And so there was 130 patients, and basically we concluded that if those patients had access to hospice, instead of coming into a MRF, they had access to home care, the home care that they required, we'd be looking at $650,000 in savings. And once again, this isn't like these are patients that are actively dying. They have a terminal diagnosis. It's clear, but because they aren't able to get to hospice, there's a kind of difference in cost. And once again, this is we published this in 2019, but do we feel like much has changed? And I would beg, once again, I beg to differ.
We have a question in the chat that's related to a lot of this. It's, what if a patient had a DNR? Would they still go to ICU and get all the gold star treatments?
Yeah, very good question. So DNR technically just means that if you die, do we try and resuscitate you? So there are patients, quote unquote, that have a DNR that we bring to hospital. So if you are, or bring to ICU. So for example, if your DNR stated something like, yeah, if you're 90, you say you don't want to be on a respirator, or you don't want to be resuscitated if you pass, but you have a bladder infection and your blood pressure is really low, we'll bring you to the ICU because we could help you achieve your goals again, right? We could help you get back to where you were, and we don't have to do necessarily anything too invasive, right? So it all depends on what your goals are. Because DNR means, it's always good to sort out what it means to the patient, because often it means different things to different people. But the technical definition of do not resuscitate is literally, if I'm dead, don't try and bring me back. But some people also synonymously use it for don't put me on any life support, version of life support. So always it's great to have that conversation. And to be honest with you, often, like just to put perspective on things, as much as we try and people have documentation, it's always good to have the conversation because you want to get to what their concerns are, what their goals are. And if you feel like you could attain their goals, then sometimes they, you know what, I think you should come to the ICU. Or sometimes they say, I don't want to be a DNR, I want to get everything. But if I tell them that if you want to live independently, if you want to get back to golfing again and all that, this isn't for you, because this is not what we're going to be able to achieve. So yeah, it really helps to delineate what how we define that. I'll just put this last slide up real quick in terms of cost, just because I think people don't realize how expensive the care is within ICU. That 1% of your gross domestic product goes to take care of critically ill patients. And as I often say, 1% of a lot is a lot, okay? So really, the gist of what I wanted to say here is that with an aging population and the complexity of these patients coming in, patients are living longer. And one other clear thing that I should mention that comes to a surprise to many people is in ICU, believe it or not, it's hard to die. It really is hard to die. Like, we are good at maintaining your blood pressure. We're good at maintaining or replacing your kidney function. We can have all these advanced ways of keeping your oxygenation and ventilation. We could even, if your heart and lungs aren't working, we could bypass that and put you on a machine called ECMO. Like, we could make that your heartbeat and lungs and provide function that way for a long period of time. And it's rare for somebody, it does happen, but it's rare for somebody that are getting the maximum treatment to pass. But the question always comes down to, what's your quality of life going to be afterwards? What's that going to look like? That's the real question. That's what we need to be addressed better, and that's what we need to be framing in our conversations. Because once again, it comes down to what's the clinical benefit? Providing all these fancy ways of providing care, and so yeah, just to put some context into that. So all this to say, this is what spawned the Quadcast or Solving Healthcare, is that we saw these things, we're producing these papers, but nothing's changing. Nothing was, you know, and you know, we would ask ourselves, like, how do we get more of this message out? how do we get more of these some of the stuff that we've discovered, some of the messaging out there, and our group started to think outside the box and said, you know, podcasts are, a lot of people listen to podcasts these days. It's a good way for providing entertainment. You could listen to them while you're driving, walking your dog, going to the gym. This is a better way of getting our message out and dealing with some of these issues. So September 2019, we spawned this thing, and I will tell you, this has been one of the best experiences in my career, in my life. And now we'll talk about a little bit about what we've seen change or develop as a result. All right, here is my friend, Dwayne Hickling. He's a urologist at the Ottawa Hospital, and he was one of the first docs at our hospital to bring virtual care to reality. And you gotta realize, like, this is pre-pandemic, right? So this is when this wasn't the norm. And we just really wanted to celebrate how well he's serving his patients, and really try and amplify why more of us should be offering this. And you think of, like, he serves a lot of people like urogynecological issues, like recurrent urinary tract infections, patients with cerebral palsy, spina bifida. And for that patient, put yourself as a caregiver, or yourself has spina bifida, you live outside the city, you have to arrange transport. If you're going with a loved one, they have to take time off of work. They have to park at the Ottawa Hospital, which is savage by you have to then make your way into the clinic. You got to wait who knows how long, because our doctor's ever on time. And I could say that as being an MD. And then you see your doctor, it's 5 or 10 minutes based on the problem that you're having. And so you have basically planned your day to see your specialist, as opposed to on your iPad or your whatever device and saying, "Hi, Dr. Hickling, I think I'm doing okay. Thanks for checking in. I don't think we need any changes in medications." Boom. Loved one gets to still go to work. You get to not go through all the agony of trying to get to the appointment. Like, this is that needs to be celebrated and amplified. And so this was one of our earlier shows. I'm not saying we had a part of seeing increase in virtual care, but it certainly did not hurt to address the issue and get people excited about it. One of our early shows was on, and Nadine, do you hear a lot of kid background noise? Okay, good, because all kids are, I have 3 children, by the way, and they're all menacing. They're all on this floor for some reason. So I apologize if I'm a bit distracted. Speaking of which, child mental health. Okay, we had Dr. Adrian Matheson, child psychologist, on, and this was in our 7th or 8th episode. And this was one of the few episodes that I would tell people that everybody and their mother needs to listen to. If you're not a parent yet, you plan to be a parent, if you got school-age kids, infants, just the amount of sound advice and in terms of parenting, but not only that, the impact of mental illness with kids, and the fact a lot of this can be addressed early, and it could really change the whole landscape for that kid's future and future generations, the kids and their relationships. And having that lens and having her perspective on seeing that was really profound, and it really struck a chord with a lot of people. And so once again, one of my colleagues, Hartwick, he came to me one day in January. He says, "Kwadwo, I heard your episode with Adrian, and I look at our situation in the ICU. We see all these young people coming in with overdoses. We see them come in with IV drug use, suicide attempts. Like, we really should be trying to address them early. And when I heard that class with Adrian, like, we got some funds set aside to do something good within our department. Like, what can we do here? And so we spawned this amazing charity out of this. And what it's called Bridges Over Barriers. And basically it provides social workers with the ability, like school, the ODSP social workers, the ability to give basic needs to our kids. So, for example, they see a kid that's struggling, that doesn't have, that needs new shoes, that needs boots, that needs a winter jacket, that needs a bus pass. The parents need struggling, they need diapers. All this within 24 hours, our social workers could be able to provide care for them. And I'll tell you, the testimonials that we have heard from this charity will melt your heart. When you hear about a family during the middle of the pandemic trying to decide between diapers and something to eat, and knowing that this charity helped provide them with some peace of mind, it really makes, like, there's very few things I will say that I'm very proud of, and this is one of them. To be part of it's something special. And so before this, and this was supposed to actually spawn in September of 2020, but because of the pandemic and how many people were struggling, social workers came to us and said, "Can we hustle? Can we get something earlier?" And we made it happen. And right now, during this week, we're actually doing a fundraiser. We've affected 320 families so far. We've raised almost $45,000, and now we're in the middle of a fundraiser where we connected with the YouthNet group and asked those kids at YouthNet, like, I think we should raise awareness. And they thought, apple is our symbol. Well, what about just thinking of creative ways of dressing up apples? And we'll call it "What's Up with Bob." And so there's a couple pictures of, this might be Hartwick's kids doing this one up here. And these are my kids. Who ate Bob? I came home to that yesterday. It's so cute. So yeah, I know it's a shameless plug, but if you do want to donate, there's a link below. And it's just, once again, such a great initiative, especially during these trying times of COVID. 10% of our donations go to Britannia Woods Community House. So we'll talk about in a bit, was how some of our racialized communities got hit really hard during the pandemic. And so this is our attempt to give back and to support them. So once again, all this, I don't think would have came about if it wasn't for producing the show. One of the things that is one of my favorite things to discuss was the patient experience. And as a clinician, you take this for granted. You don't really get a sense of how much struggle some of our patients go through. And the stuff that I've learned clinically, the stuff that I've learned by having these conversations with some of these our guests that have gone through things that you would never wish to go through, has really changed the way I approach medicine. But then on the far left is Cindy Hooper. I don't know if any of you guys know her story, but she is a colleague of mine, Jonathan Hooper, who works in the ICU. Like, his wife, one day, having some back pain, test after test, can't figure it out, eventually gets diagnosed pancreatic cancer in 2013. And, obviously we all think this is fatal. We feel like, this is horrible. Somebody that's extremely active, as you can see there, healthy person, eats well. How can this happen to? And she had the resilience and the fortitude of someone no one that I've seen before. She, while on, had a Whipple surgery, but on chemotherapy, did an Ironman triathlon in Kelowna and like completed an Ironman triathlon while on chemo. Hearing her like overcome this, and you can't help to be motivated to do better, to do more. She went to all her radiation appointments by a bike. She cycled to all her radiation appointments. Like, are you kidding me? Like, I can't cycle to the Quickie Mart. And she's doing this on radiation and chemo, and just her work ethic, her positive mindset, her willingness to help others, and the money she's raised, over $300,000 for the TOH Foundation for Cancer Research. She is a legend, and we love her. Cindy is exceptional. Dr. Lynn Ashton. I don't know if any of you guys know Lynn, but the med student, she's excited to, looking at her future career as a family doc, so she was a resident already, and she experienced, while sitting down, a cardiac arrest, fell backwards, broke her neck, and left her paraplegic. And the stories, like having that authentic conversation with her, what it was like to go through 2 years in hospitals to try and recover and get some semblance of life back. Hearing her express the fact that after her injury, she never got to go back to her previous home. Hearing her talk about how, even getting home and having, coordinating home care visits and getting that assistance needed to just be able to function, you just learn so much. You realize, it's as simple as just discharging a patient home. You got to make sure that all their affairs are in order, that things are organized, or else they're left in a lurch. And hear stories of how she felt abandoned, and also, I was just thinking, I wasn't planning on mentioning this, I forgot this too, how when she told me this story about when she was in the ICU, I think, and the resident, before leaving the ICU, asked her, like, is there anything else I could get for you? Or is there anything else I could do to help you? And she had her cell phone that was a little bit too far away, but the whole time she was thinking, like, I don't want to bug anybody, but that simple question of, like, what can I do for you? Like, is there anything else I could do? And it meant the world to her. And you just realize that something so simple could bring so much peace of mind to our patients. Once again, that just, can't help to digest that and add that to your practice. And so, once again, big lessons from the patient experience. The woman on the far right is Dr. Jen McComb, who's a dear friend of mine. I've known her since we were in high school, and we were excited. She was one of our first friends to have children, and she had a little boy, Henry, beautiful boy, strong, and at about 8 months old, he was diagnosed with the neuroblastomas. Extensively, the tumors were wrapping around major vessels in his chest, his trachea, within his mediastinum, around his spinal column. It was, I remember, like, I'll never forget the day that we found out. Like, I consider her one of my best friends, and when I heard that, we just couldn't believe it. This 8-month, wonderful, beautiful child, and their family, her and her husband, Mick, having to go through this. And in the stories you hear about, like, one of the early visits when Henry was hospitalized, and he was doing okay, but it's a weekend and the teams are busy, and Jen was describing how she just, part of the routine is getting that chat with doctors, just making sure everything's okay. Just, I was just really waiting for the doctors to come in and have that quick chat, and they never came. And the amount of anxiety and the amount of unease that left her. And once again, like, this is not, you know, someone that came in for a minor hip surgery. Their kid came in for chemotherapy and significant treatment, and with a diagnosis that luckily wasn't fatal. And he's I don't know now how old he is. I should know this. 11 years old now, and is thriving. But hearing that story about, you know, how that quick interaction of just popping your head in and saying, hey, everything's good, and, you know, sorry, we're having to get the weekend, like, that would have made all the difference to her at the time. And once again, it's one of those things that you can't help not to bring to your practice after hearing it. Because I'll be full disclosure, if I'm in the ICU, it's a weekend, we're hustling. Before hearing that story, everything's good, you know, I might not see the patient, you know, like I might not pop in to say hello, but when you hear something like that, you can't help to want to bring that to fruition. So this is the year of George Floyd. This is the year of anti-Black racism. And some of you may know I've been doing quite a bit of advocacy for that. And this is one of the gifts this show has given me, is to be able to advocate for this. And this is hard. I won't lie. Like, anytime you go back and you reflect at your life and you reflect at your racist, your experience with racism, those that may have heard me speak about it, I've been, as earliest memory of a 5, 6, 7-year-old being called every name you could think of, whether it's as a child, middle school, high school, by patients, by a family member, and the systemic issues with systemic racism. And yeah, it's been a challenging year in talking about these issues. And the woman you see there, Chika Wiwa, Dr. Chika Wiwa, she was the first Black valedictorian in Canada, essentially. And at the University of Toronto, she was the only Black in her class. And I'm going to tell you right now, this is not going to be the first time you hear this woman's name. She is a legend. She is strong. She is resilient, and she pushed me to do better. She single-handedly basically advocated for increasing presence of Black students within U of T. I think they have 23 students. She's talking about advocating for anti-Black racism. She tells her story. She tells about how when she walks into the, you know, your new U of T grad or U of T medical student, you walk in and somebody comments, it's like, how'd you get in? Is there some kind of quota or something to your face? And she overcomes this, becomes a huge advocate. She's now even, like, her message has been so beautiful that she's now on the board of governors for Indigo. Yeah, Indigo. Like, she is a legend. And once again, she inspired me to do better. There's one thing, one thing to just tell your story, which, once again, it's not always easy, but what are you going to do about it? Push others to be strong and to do things about it. It's one thing to put out a statement on anti-racism, but what is your community? What is your organization doing? And as a Black man, what am I going to do to support my Black community? And as a result, one of the beautiful things that spawned, once again, that's what spawned from the show, is we developed a Black mentorship program for kids that want to entertain a career in medicine. Because one of the things that was clear from the conversation with Chika was, you know, to create change, you need to advocate for your people. The people need to have a seat at the table. And so this is what spawned the mentorship program. So this is Kwadwo. He's our first member. He's a first-year university at U of O. Any of the social media posts he does, we're starting to get him involved in research as well. And he's a real gifted kid, and we also have two or three other members of the mentorship program. We just talk via Zoom every few weeks, and once again, this never would have happened, or I don't think it would have happened if it wasn't for starting the show. All right, healthy living. This is the one thing that, you know, we've done a lot about this on the show, actually. And a lot of this has actually spawned from COVID, which we'll talk about separately in a second. But one of what I thought was a surprising missed opportunity was talking about how, you know, reduce, in my opinion, if we're healthier from a physical standpoint, from eating healthier, we exercise better, you know, reducing your risk of it, especially when we know that poor metabolic health, diabetes, obesity, hypertension, all linked to poor outcomes. And so we really pushed this. And one of my first stories, two stories actually, was Dr. Tom Saris, he's an intensive care doc over at Montfort Hospital, colleague of mine. And we saw this early in the pandemic, that the patients that were coming in had elevated BMI, diabetes, all kind of was part of the profile of what we're seeing with patients coming in with severe COVID. And he took the power back. He's like, I don't want to be at risk. He lost 30 pounds through fasting, a little bit of low carb to reduce his risk of getting COVID. And it was one of our most popular shows, where he tells a story on why he decided to turn things around. And I love that story. I love it because it shows that it's attainable. It shows that when you have the drive, you could do it. And so, yeah, and we've done a lot of show on, you know, so not only diet, but exercise, you know, ketogenic, low carb, vegan, plant-based diets, just so to get, like, because I'm not a believer of there's a prescription for all. I'm a believer that you got to find what works for you. And I got this letter from one of the nurses at Montfort as well. And she said, you know, my mom during this pandemic, we both listened to this show on low carb, and she was on diabetic on 2 medications, and the message was that she decided to go low carb. Within 2 weeks off her diabetic meds, blood pressure was good, and it was feeling great. And I love that story because, once again, that's a life that's potentially impacted. That's a life that's not only reducing their risk of COVID, reducing their cancer risk, reducing their cardiovascular risk, stroke risk. And that's all from the message that we were trying to portray. So yeah, I can't express how gratifying that is, and that we could reach the lives of people like that. So I've mentioned COVID a couple of times here. Our general theme with COVID was, you know, there was a lot of fear around COVID, a lot of shaming, a lot of fear. You should be scared. Like, you know, you're all gonna die. We're all gonna die. To lock down. We need to never leave our houses. And, you know, at the beginning of the pandemic, when we don't know what we're dealing with, absolutely, we need to do everything to keep our people safe. We don't know what's next. But our fear was that there's some consequences to the way we were approaching things. Not only like the mental side, how fatiguing it could be if we're not hearing about any positivity. But what about our children? What about the people that are most vulnerable? What about their mental illness? So we did our best to address some of these things and bring awareness to them. So Mark Tyndall, who's an infectious disease doc out in Vancouver, hearing about how his COVID or the homeless population was struggling, and you know, we're hearing about increasing overdoses, increasing use and substance abuse, and just bringing awareness to that issue. Dr. Michelle Ward, this is the one that broke my heart. And you would hear about, we always heard, maybe I read it in the newspaper, they're saying child abuse cases are going down, and intuitively you're like, oh, that's good. But it was because of being reported, because normally the kids they'd be reported by teachers and coaches. And so you're hearing about the kids not getting to school and knowing that people are at home with their abusers and not having been out. And we weren't talking about that in the media at all. We weren't addressing this at all. And so we felt a real strong responsibility to send that message out, because the beautiful thing about that episode with Michelle was what we do about it. It's not just like, hey, be aware that there's a risk that kids could be maltreated or abused, but have the conversation with your neighbor. Spend that extra second with the kids outside and say, hey, is everything okay? And be that one. She calls it being that one person. Actually, it was a very emotional episode. Actually, she is a legit angel for doing what she does. We wanted do our best to deal with so many questions that we had about COVID-19. So we got some of the best Canadian experts. You might have seen Dr. Isaac Bogosh and Dr. Suman Chakrabarti, for people to be able to ask questions about COVID. Is it safe to get your kids to school? What's the concerns? How do we protect our kids? And these are some of the most productive episodes that we had. We did them live, similar to what we're doing now, just to do our best to appease the public and give confidence to our teachers. And then another one that I was really proud of is during that same time when kids were going back to school, everybody was nervous, everybody was anxious, the teachers, the parents. And so we brought Dr. Matheson back to talk about how to address, deal with resilience with your kids. A lot of married people out there were struggling too, so we brought a couple of therapists, and then Michelle Sorensen, we did an individual show with her where we talked about how to create resilience in ourselves to best deal with the challenges ahead. And I loved it. It was just, you left there feeling inspired. You left there feeling more strong, that you could overcome whatever the future holds. So it was just a great opportunity. And this is right audience, this one. So we dealt with grief and death and dying. And this was, I'm sure some of you know Heather Busada. She's been on a couple times, but wanted to talk about death and dying in general is one of our early episodes, but also during how to manage it during the pandemic. This was probably out of all the things that I felt that was the most challenging during the pandemic, this was when you're seeing someone, you're that 88-year-old patient dying alone because of whether family is fearful of contracting COVID, or we're limiting the visitors. They got a family of 4 kids and they got to choose which one gets to see mom. Like, this is, as you guys know, like, this is the grieving process. Like, talk about complicated grief, talk about having prolonged grief. It's horrible. It was horrible. Like, that was one of the hardest parts of dealing with things in the pandemic. And so we wanted to get our grief expert to help manage that there. And we got to answer questions from healthcare providers on how to best manage these issues. So it really felt like we were giving back. And then Julie Drury, she's a huge patient advocacy person, and this is a show we did recently, but really inspired me to do more to advocate for our patients and families. Like, why is there a struggle to get family in long-term care these days when we know how to protect them? Why is it that, you know, we can't get family into the hospital when, you know, there's no real risk to the patient and family based on literature? And so she really inspired me to ask more questions and do more. But all these guys are doing great advocacy work and need to be celebrated, that's for sure. And then another thing that I think we brought attention to, you saw, and we talked about a bit in our earlier slides, just like, well, maybe I'll talk about, I guess, morale first. No, futility first. So we did a couple of episodes on the impact of taking care of quote unquote futile patients, i.e. we can't achieve their goals, or clinicians don't feel like they'll be able to survive or achieve their goals by providing care. And I probably got the most, we probably got the most letters and feedback by this. So Dr. DeGidio, one of our intensive care doctors, did our very first episode with, and he's just talking about how, you know, better communication with families, really empowering doctors to be more, what's the word I'm looking for? Making sure that we come with a recommendation, not putting the onus on family for decisions by themselves, because just to take that burden away. It really sat well with a lot of people. This is Carly Hickey, who really gave us a nurse perspective of taking care of patients that were deemed futile, what it's like. You know, I'll never forget when I was a trainee, and we were dealing with one of these cases where the cancer patient in the ICU is dying, but family wanted us to do everything. And while we're doing our rounds, I see the nurse crying, like just started to cry, like off in the corner a bit. And I was like, Margaret, what's happening? Everything okay? And she goes, you know, Kwadwo, every time I'm in that room, I feel like I'm torturing this poor man. For 12 hours in that room, I'm poking, I'm prodding, I'm doing all these things, and there's no purpose for us to do this. And it just was extremely enlightening. And Carly was also able to really illustrate what it's like as being a frontline person dealing with that on a regular basis, what it does to your soul, what it does to your morale, what it does to your willingness to want to get back to work, what it does to your burnout. Like it was just this huge issue that I think we danced around, but it was the message that we got after that episode is, thank you for hearing our voice, thank you for seeing us and recognizing this as an issue. And so it was very humbling to hear that. The other thing was we've been trying to approach things through the show directly or indirectly, is like getting people's morale up. Like the picture on the lower left there is an initiative that one of our team members thought up. We were in the middle of the pandemic, and people were like, I don't know how many people are frontline, but we were scared, especially in the ICU. We don't know, are we all going to get sick? Are we going to get overrun? Is it how much of what are we dealing with? Are we going to be New York? You know, are we going to be Italy? And so the tension was like, you could cut with a spoon. That expression, if it's not an expression, I just made it up. Cut with a spoon. And so one of the team members say, "Hey, Kwadwo, what about just doing a GoFundMe to try and feed frontline staff?" I'm like, okay. This was a Tuesday. I said, let's do it. You know, I'm working, but can you please teach me how to set it up? They set up the GoFundMe. Thursday, we open it. Friday, I get to be on the news to tell people that we're doing GoFundMe. A month later, $30,000 raised to feed frontline staff. It was amazing. And like, look, these are people's faces. Look at their faces. This is genuine. This is genuine joy and change. And like when you would go into the break flow, when you went into the break room, you would hear like it's all serious. There was no smiles or what have you. And then you walked in and you see this. People were like, we're being seen. People see us. They're advocating for us. They're behind us. Thank you. And the messages that we would get from the community, it was just tremendous. And to be a part of that was amazing. And so once again, just have a platform allowed this to happen. And so it was just something really close to heart. And by the way, because this is the kind of people we're dealing with too, these frontline staff. When the pandemic slowed down and it was getting into summer months, and we had maybe I think it ended up being about 2,000 extra, and you could tell people were like, "You're good, you know, we're good." They say like they told me to give the money to the food bank, you know. So we not only did they receive it in kind, but they also were like, "Let's give back in our own way as well." These are amazing human beings. Okay, now I remember why I was supposed to talk morale first, then futility. This is more natural transition to this next quiz. Carl, we got another one. Now I remember why I didn't want to sit, because I was going to be a little bit more dynamic. You know what I'm saying? Okay, so we're talking about futile cases. So we have a process called Consent and Capacity Board. That's the acronym CCB there. So once again, there are cases where patients have expressed somewhere down the road that they would not want to receive aggressive care, or the clinical team feels that the care they're providing will not get them better. They won't survive this illness. But the family is insisting on us doing everything, okay? So we are currently attempting to publish this paper. We just got, unfortunately, recently rejected. We took 12 ICU cases, went to this Consent and Capacity Board, i.e., once again, patients where we thought the care that they were receiving was futile, okay? How much do you think those 12 cases cost? How much do they cost? And this is at a hospital perspective. So when we look at TOH budget, the Ottawa Hospital budget, how much do we think that cost the system? It's funny because like, I can't see any of you, so like I have way more confidence. Like if I was on the stage, there's no way I'd be singing right now or doing this. Actually, I'd probably be doing this. You know.
Next time we'll pipe in some music for you.
It's better than what I'm doing, eh? Like you don't want to. Like, by the way, that was in D minor. Okay, that was D minor, or F sharp. Okay. Does it look like we got enough responses? Let's see if this works this time. $8 million. Okay. The average length of stay between those guys in ICU, I think, was about 4 months, 3.5 months or months. None of them are alive, by the way. They all passed. And to give you a sense of the type of cases we're talking about, there's one gentleman, and there's one gentleman was elderly with every comorbidity you could think of, on dialysis, and if you were to comb his hair, his skin would come off. Like this is the type of some of the cases that we were dealing with, and still having to dispute whether care is futile. And that $8 million often can represent a significant part of ICU budget. And once again, some opportunity cost. Not to say you should never receive care, but that amount of money could serve in so many ways where patients can receive the care that would benefit them or improve them. Okay, so on a better note, what's on the horizon with us? I think I want to get some people excited. Solving Wellness. This is an initiative we're going to try in the new year, where it's an online platform. Actually, I could take a step. We're a bit inspired by the medical student Ryan Seguin. He committed suicide about a year ago, just before the holidays. He was I think a second year medical student at the time at the University of Ottawa. And you hear more of these stories of physician burnout. And, we thought, what could we do to try and address some of these things? And so one of the initiatives we're doing is a nursing wellness initiative, where we're, I think our interventions are yoga and, it's pre-COVID. It was supposed to be like yoga, guided meditation, and pet therapy. But this one, the Solving Wellness, is all virtual. You'll have access to workouts, recorded and live, yoga, stress management, productivity, how to enhance productivity, basically just tools for wellness. And we're hoping to create a community where people feel comfortable chatting about things, what's working for them, what isn't working for them, and just create a resilient group of clinicians. And so yeah, it's starting out as a study, actually, to evaluate docs to see if it makes a difference in terms of their well-being. But I think the big picture is we'll open it up to whoever wants in and see if we change that boogie, as we like to call it on our show. Another initiative that we're going to try our best to do is, there's a lot of momentum post George Floyd about addressing racism, but a lot of places I felt like we're just doing a lot of this with no action. We want to do our part to be more advocates for how to address racism in healthcare, and so we're hoping to get like a formal sense of, or developing a team that any organization, any division that wants to learn more and how to address it, they can come to us, and we'll help address that. And then I don't like to plan much. Wherever there's gaps in healthcare, if we feel like we need to be better at, like the whole COVID thing, that was definitely not planned. I end up doing a little bit of media talking about this stuff, like that was planned. And so, like, wherever we need to fill in the gaps, hopefully we could be at the forefront of trying to address that and trying to help.
Just before you go to some of the lessons learned, there are questions. One is a comment. So some of the audience is not in Ottawa. Are there some simple ways to start programs in smaller rural settings, for example? Because there's not the same funding or resources that there are in larger urban centers. I'm not sure exactly what programs they're referring to. So maybe Stephanie, you could clarify that in the chat. And there was also a question about CCB cases and costs. Is that related to concerns around liability and litigation?
So to answer the CCB question, so this is part of, like, it's not it's a judiciary committee, but it's not a legal it's not a quote unquote legal case, but this is our attempt to deal with the issue. So it's, the fear of being litigated, you'd almost think would prevent people from doing a consent capacity board because they don't want to ruffle people's feathers. But it's actually the process to deal with when clinicians want to deal with fairness or what the patient would want. And so that's when we address it in that way. I've yet to see a case go into like the courts as a result of a CCB case, but I mean, never say never. But yeah, it's the essentially the official way of addressing when you don't think the family or substitute decision maker is acting in their family's best interest. And then so it sounds like Nadine, we didn't get clarification on the rural question. Okay. All right. We're almost home, but we'll talk about lessons learned from this, and this might get a little bit into the rural question. One of the, I would say, golden rules. You see something that needs to be addressed. You wanna, we'll call it change that boogie. You want to create that change. Do not wait for permission. Do not wait for approval by X, Y, Z. Hustle. Ask for forgiveness afterwards. And because there's too many things that are going to act to impede you. People don't want you to succeed. There's always going to be that voice that is, they call them, what do they call them, Karens now? I don't know if that's politically correct, but there's always going to be that Debbie Downer that's trying to hold you down. If you believe in it, and the people that you respect and really value their opinion feel like whatever initiative that you're going to do has some merit, go for it. That charity that we talked about, the feeding frontline staff, I didn't ask nobody. If I did, there would not. I could promise you it wouldn't have happened, because I did get a little slack for it afterwards. But it was well worth it. And once again, it's easier to ask for forgiveness than it is for permission. One thing within healthcare, that we are very regimented in our thinking. We are, it's almost, I always feel like it's discouraged to think outside the box. But, read outside your area of interest. Talk to people outside of your specialty, out of medicine even. Some of the best ideas we come up with have come from engineers or computing science individuals. And thinking outside the box is what you need to do to transform healthcare, to solve healthcare. Because if we continue to go with the same stream, this is why we see things can be so slow moving. Diversity matters. Diversity is good. Embrace it. This is something that I can't emphasize enough. If you look at the best functioning companies, tech, online, Googles of the world, it's all about diversity. Young, old, BIPOC, different cultures. You need that different perspective. You don't just bring in people that think like you or look like you. I said one of the challenges when I was doing all these racism talks was you reflect on things. And when I was giving a talk to the critical care forum, I've never been asked to talk at it, except for the only time I've been asked to talk to it was about racism, despite being productive and producing a lot of research content. And what am I trying to say? Eventually, within the critical care world, one of the things I said is, like, we haven't moved the needle. We haven't gotten our patients more functional. We haven't gotten, we haven't had any dramatic change in years. So we got to approach things different. Embrace diversity. Embrace a different perspective. Embrace it out of the box thinking, because we can only move up. I promise you. Perfect is the enemy of the good. This is one of my main mantras. I'd rather have, when it comes to, for example, publications, I'd rather have that A- paper and get it publication and get that out in a couple of weeks than wait 3 months to get that attempt to get that A+ paper. Sometimes it's not going to be perfect, but that's okay. You learn as you go. I would call it failing fast. Best way to be productive. Just hustle. Don't overthink it. You're going to learn as you go. Have faith in the fact that you're bright. You'll adapt as needed, but don't let perfection prevent you from achieving your goals. Here's another lesson that this is like one of my favorite topics, because I love productivity. Always think about being as efficient as possible. So this is an illustration of Pareto's principle, or the 80-20 rule. And what it's trying to illustrate is, often in life, like say you're a business person, and you look at all your revenue, about 20% or 80% of your revenue comes from 20% of your clients. So the argument is like, really focus on that 20%, and you're going to see some exponential growth. Same thing about where traffic is. Same thing where your fitness. Like, you find that 20% that produces the 80% output. Same thing in when it comes to when you're trying to create change. What are you best at? What's that area where you could really excel? Are you the communicator? Are you the executor? Are you the team builder? And work around that to be able to produce your best output. Don't get caught up in the little things. And one of the other slides I put up there is on delegation. Delegation is your friend. If you want to produce, if you want to be productive, if you want to achieve your goals, you got to know where to focus energy, and hire a friend, call on a friend, build that team. Like, the one single move that has probably changed my life in terms of career, and I can actually say I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for this one move, was hiring my own research assistant with my own money. I said, screw this. I can't deal with trying to format this paper for the X period of time to try and put into this journal. No, I'd rather pay Cynthia Wan, thank you, and you do that for me, and allow me to continue to do things that I'm good at, continue to work on ideas and build teams and so forth. This is along the same line. Build a team. Don't rely just on yourself. You can't do it by yourself. And once again, delegate. This is the key to success too. Knowing where your strengths are and focus your energy there. All right, last few slides. This is along the lines of out-of-the-box thinking. Like, as I talked about earlier, producing papers in medical journals wasn't creating much change, but we're in an information age. We're in a social media age. We're med Twitter. Like, when we look at how it was being spread during this pandemic, and a lot of it was not on medical journals. It was on the experience through social media. And I think it's important to think about, the message that you're trying to get out there. You got to think about other non-conventional ways to be able to spread the word. And, despite your age, I think it's important, if you really want to get your message out there, that, these are ways to do that, whether it's podcasting, whether it's videos on YouTube, whether it's videos on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, or what's the other one? TikTok. I feel like I'm still too old for TikTok, but I don't know. And still have dignity. Did I say that out loud? I did say that out loud. But yeah, I think we need to think about ways of reaching larger audiences and getting your message out. The other gift, I must say, from the show, the personal growth. Like, I encourage anybody that's been trying to think about, whether you're in that rural setting of building a community or creating a program or doing something bigger than yourself. It's been one of the best experiences I've had in my career going through this. Whether it's meeting these amazing guests, whether it's having the opportunity to talk to you guys, whether it's those charities, helping create those charities, and seeing the impact that it has on so many people. Whether it's, I'm not saying this. I don't want to sound. I'm trying to be don't want to sound like I don't know how to say this and sound all braggy, but the fact that someone like me is on board of governors of the Children's Hospital, all because of something like this, like it's been amazing. So I do encourage anybody that's like, you know, that is thinking about putting themselves more out there, building a team, trying to create change. Like amazing things can happen, and I hope at the end of this all that you feel like you could achieve that too. I wasn't totally sure on the format. We don't have to do this. I was gonna, or maybe we could just say questions, but one of the things that I thought maybe would be worth discussing amongst the group was, you know, the reasons that we did all this in the first place was trying to overcome the barriers for change within healthcare, you know, and discussing like how to overcome them, and maybe asking people like, what can you do better for your organization? What ways do you think we could do better? But maybe, caller, maybe we could just field some questions. Maybe that's easier and probably more valuable to people.
Sure, and people can also reflect on the questions that you asked and add those to the chat as well. So Stephanie did clarify, and you were responding a bit to what she was asking about, you know, what can she do essentially as an individual in a more rural setting, that she also sees some of these types of cases, some of the more futile interventions, and you know, what can they do to address that? Just
yeah. What I would say is, was it Stephanie you said?
Stephanie, yes.
Yeah. Stephanie, I would say once again, one of the gifts of COVID is we get to have interactions like this. You don't need to, you know, get a million people in the room. You don't have to get people to rearrange their schedules to get them around. You know, something as simple as, hey, I'm gonna get Gianni Digidio, Kwadwo Kyeremanteng to talk to us about end-of-life care, and all the stakeholders that you can, invite them, make a panel discussion, make it a presentation, make it engaging, give them a little bit of incentive to want to be there, make it even CME, so that the docs, whoever you're trying to influence, get some credit for it and record it. They could watch it later. They could spread the word and just start with awareness, start with discussion, keep it simple. Don't, you know, something that's actionable that you could do right now. And if you feel like it's a problem in this moment and you got that bandwidth to deal with it, like, you can make a difference.
One of the other comments was around chatting about compassionate communities initiatives, which a lot of what you've talked about touches on that, the importance of normalizing conversations about dying, death, and grieving, and having advanced care planning conversations and goals of care conversations. So I think that's connected to all of this, and maybe that's something that we could focus on in a future conversation, but I was wondering what you thought about that.
I love it. I think we got to just destigmatize this. Like there's so much hinges on these conversations. Like, you know, whether dad or mom suffers, whether dad or mom, whether how the experience is for the kids watching mom and dad go through some pain and suffering when they wouldn't have wanted it. The disputes that happen within families, like one of the worst things I find when it comes to end of life, which eats at me. You know, sometimes you'll get a trainee approach a family. You know, there'll be 3 siblings, say a daughter and 2 sons. Daughter says, "Dad wouldn't want this." The 2 sons come in from out of town and say, "Dad's a fighter." And then that trainee goes to the daughter, say, who's the SDM, is like, "What do you want us to do?" And that eats at me, because if she advocates for what her dad wants, the 2 brothers are going to be angry at her. You'd be jeopardizing that relationship in that family. You know what I mean? As opposed to us like, I'd rather any time family member be mad at me because, like, you know, I'd rather that than them have disputes amongst themselves. So much changes on these discussions, and like, we know we're all going to die one day, and so to try and normalize it the best we can. And there's a lot of great ideas you hear out there, like, you know, whether it's YouTube videos, whether it's promotion on social media just to promote these things. But yeah, I think it's ultra important.
And that's kind of connected to one of the other comments, which was, how do we get paramedics or hospitals to respect the wishes of people with DNR orders, but use paddles anyway?
Yeah, to me, I think it's to empower them to realize that you can influence, like you should, how do I put this? Do the right thing. You think of what is best for your patient, and don't be shy to make that recommendation. Don't be shy to say, you know, the paramedic reads this thing and says, oh, he doesn't want to be resuscitated, and look at the loved one's face and be like, on this, I don't think we should do this. I don't think we should try and do CPR, because it's easier to just do CPR. That's not hard. Like, it's in those circumstances. What's harder is having those discussions and being frank with the loved one. And so making sure that they feel empowered, making them see that what the consequences of their actions are too, like to have that discussion. Like I know I've emphasized cost, but you know, even if they go through this and survive, the PTSD, the depression, the anxiety that they suffer through is not easy. Like, even as a 25-year-old that's healthy. So yeah, we need to have the consequences in the back of your mind when you're choosing your next action.
Yeah, for sure. And we've been trying to do a lot of work to support care planning conversations and organizing workshops, doing some training for volunteers. Compassionate Ottawa has been offering some workshops in Ottawa. We've worked with their volunteers to do some training as well. So I mentioned that to the group because it's come up in discussion. If anybody has an interest in supporting more advanced care planning conversations in your community, then you can contact the Champlain Hospice Palliative Care Program. And for healthcare providers, we're also trying to offer more training on serious illness conversations. And we've got some training sessions coming up. So if you're interested in that, please get in touch with us as well. There's my shameless plugs. Somebody working in long-term care, also talking about, connected to this, has taken advantage of COVID to have very in-depth conversations with residents and their power of attorney for personal care or substitute decision maker about end of life and discuss many ethical issues. Our palliative care program in-house has become very robust during this period. Well done.
That's beautiful. We had with Celeste Fong. It was one of our shows during the pandemic, talking about exactly what you mentioned, to really enhance, make sure that goal of care discussions were happening, and just really emphasize, like, who do we feel, what families would want to come to hospital if needed. And so I think that's tremendous.
A question about, do long-term care homes have seminars, discussions with families when people go to live there? I think not. I don't know what your experience is. I know from a lot of the long-term care homes that we work with, and anybody who works in long-term care in the chat, please add to the conversation. But I know a lot of them do have conversations when people go there. But as has been alluded to in the chat and some of what you've said as well, these conversations are really difficult, especially in COVID, especially if you're trying to have them over FaceTime, or the circumstances are such that you're trying to have the conversation in a crisis. So it's really difficult to have a quality conversation then.
Yeah, and the emphasis is nice to have it early, when it's not, like the worst time, like in my world, is asking somebody to want to be intubated when they can't breathe, because they'll take anything that will take the suffering away. So yeah, earlier the better. I definitely agree with that, Nadine.
Yeah, and there are a couple of comments here from folks in long-term care about having the discussions over and over again, especially during COVID. Having conversations starting at the 6-week care conference following admission. All new residents are asked about powers of attorney for health and finance, and used to ask if funeral arrangements are made as well.
Nice.
Oh, this is, they're coming in really quickly. I'm trying to keep up, but working with our local rural hospice to try and speak the same language about end of life so that the entire community is less death-defying and death-denying. Yeah, language is so important. I just wonder what your thoughts are on that.
I mean, yes, language is important. It's funny, even one of the things that we tell the trainees, if you think, I tell them, use the word dying, death. Like when you got, excuse me, somebody that's not doing well on a ventilator, and look, in your opinion, you think, the patient's dying, use that language in that family meeting. Hey, sorry, you want to come say hi real quick? Come here, Ziggy. This is number 3. What's up, Ziggy?
Hello.
Say hi, Ziggy.
Hello.
Okay. Is that rescue box? Just say bye-bye. You don't speak? Okay. Be good. Or you want to stay here? Okay, we'll stay. Okay. Or leave. Yeah, we try and use the language. Don't come in. Okay, good, guys, get out of here. Okay. Kuma, can you get rid of the kids, please? Love you. Sorry. The language matters. Use the term. Like when you say not doing well, I don't think things are going in the right direction. Use the language that is clear. We feel like they're dying. They feel like so that it things into perspective, and most people appreciate authentic reaction, or being authentic and being true.
There's another comment about how these conversations aren't consistent across the long-term care homes. That in addition to their work in healthcare, Jane is also volunteering with Family Council, and what she hears from families is that palliative care support is not consistent.
One thing, and I know Jill was on this before, I don't know if she's still there, but one of my pipe dreams was, and this might be happening already, so I apologize, is like really have palliative embedded in the long-term care. Like really embedded, like have a doc that's associated, the face of that doc is associated with that long-term care facility, dealing with palliative issues. Yeah, I hear you, Jill. Sorry, I do, as I'm saying this, I'm like, I don't know if this is a good thing to say. But yeah, no, it is a pipe dream at this time, but I do really think that if it did exist, especially now that there's also that virtual component. I'm just thinking outside the box, now that virtual care is a little bit more prominent, maybe there's opportunities there, or training with in-house on a regular basis, which I'm sure Jill's doing already, to deal with these issues and empowering the teams that are there. I'm just thinking out loud, obviously, but certainly a consistent present palliative care component to these long-term care facilities would be amazing.
Yeah, and this is connected to some of the comments earlier on. So there's a comment here that people aren't seeing all the comments. So if you want everybody to see your comment or your question, you have to make sure you click all panelists and attendees, and that way everybody can see it. There was a question about why people are going to hospital and not hospice, for example. Is it a lack of education? And I tried to respond in the chat and mentioned that, you know, education awareness is part of it. It's also a resource issue. In Ottawa, we only have 19 hospice beds, for example. There's not residential hospice available across the region. We do also have 19 palliative care unit beds at Briere, and there is palliative care embedded in long-term care and palliative care offered in the community. But it isn't, palliative care is not yet embedded in every setting, including in hospital. You, I'm sure, see this. And even if you are approaching end of life, and even if you have a number of health crises, you're still not necessarily going to be referred to the palliative care team or have a conversation with somebody in palliative care. Like, you could go into hospital and never talk about the fact that you're dying.
Yeah, I mean, it honestly depends on who you're under, what doc, what team. You know, it's, some people think they deal with it well. Some people, even though they don't, it's a hard issue to address. And one of the strategies I felt strongly about is just to increase our presence, like the palliative care presence, that, you know, even if we're not necessarily engaged with all the patients that we feel like we should, but knowing that we're around, we're available to provide that support and for the teams that are involved, let them know that we're there to support them, never shaming them, not saying why they, you know, having that positive energy to encourage us to get involved, and them eventually seeing the benefits of, you know, getting our team engaged in that patient's journey. Sorry, I'm reading and listening, reading and talking at the same time. But yeah, I think there's a lot of denied death though in hospital, man. Like, it's a lot of, like, the amount of times I hate to say where, you know, one team thinks there's more to offer, whereas either as I'm wearing my ICU hat or my palliative care hat, saying like, hey, this doesn't seem conducive with the patient's wishes, or that this will be survivable. But yeah, it's tough.
Yeah. So a couple more comments. Good news now is that the Heart Institute Heart Failure Clinic has a palliative team. Yes, that is good news. We are very fortunate. There are definitely still a lot of gaps we have to work on, but we have wonderful resources like Roger Nielsen House. We've got the Mission Hospice that works with the homeless and vulnerably housed. We've got some amazing palliative care providers working in community. We've got the Regional Palliative Consultation Team. We have got a lot of really good people supporting this work. And what I've loved about your presentation is the call, you've helped inspire us all to be better. And being that one person, and I love don't wait for permission. So hopefully we can continue to connect with all of these wonderful resources and all of you wonderful people doing the work that you're doing to make change. So I would challenge everybody to try and think about, you know, what is that one thing that you're going to take away from this and going to do? Not ask permission, just go do. Be a little bit of a boat rocker. So I'm just going to give people a couple more minutes to ask any questions. And while I'm doing that, I'm going to ask a couple of maybe tough questions. So you touched on of your lessons learned, but I was just wondering, from all of the wonderful people that you've spoken with and learned from, what's been your biggest aha moment, do you think?
Biggest aha. Yeah, but I don't know if it's two part, but there was one that we did with Michelle Sorensen on resilience, and it might have been just a time of life, or you know, doing a bunch of ICU in a row, papers due, or grants are due, kids are going back to or going back. We had a couple COVID scares with one of the kids, like having to go get tested, and she just says in the talk, like, or in the interview, she's like, it's okay to take time for yourself. It's okay to have that self-care. It's okay to be kind to yourself, or whatever, those lines. And I don't know if it was just I was tired, or it just hit me. It was like, wow, like this is, maybe it's just something I needed at the time. It was, but it was just something that I thought so many people are needing to hear that. And I even, ironically, there was one of our these came to me, and she was crying to me, saying how much it meant to hear that from another like a professional, like a psychologist. And I don't know, maybe yeah, that's the one that came to mind where I was like, wow, like it is okay to be kind to yourself. Because I mean, I move quick, as you could tell. I don't, you know, I don't say, probably don't say no enough, but like I do a lot, and sometimes you need to exhale, and that was definitely a time where I valued that.
Wonderful. Thank you. Yes, it's so important. We all need permission to take care of ourselves, or remind ourselves to do that. So the other tough question was, if you could change one thing tomorrow in your healthcare world, what would that be?
If I could change one thing, I think it would be, it's along the lines, I think we need to, so this might seem a bit convoluted, but I think I would make sure that people have basic needs. I think it would be like housing and a basic income, because what I slowly realize is how much is truly dependent on social determinants. Like when you realize like the outlook of somebody that doesn't have a home, their cancer risk, their life expectancy, their resource use in hospital, all this stuff is exponential because they don't have a home, they don't have a basic income. When you see about how much that's affected, even in COVID, like when poor socioeconomic status, much that affects things. That really, to me, if I were to try and, if I had to choose one thing that would give us like the 80-20 of that, I think it would be housing. And I do think in general, though, we don't emphasize prevention enough. Like you guys saw me display the numbers for, you know, if you walk in the ICU door, like what the costs are associated with that. But like, let's do our best not to don't come in. You know what I mean? Let's talk about ways that we can prevent that, whether that's addressing your mental health. Actually, that's another one. Can I take another cheat one? Okay. Free mental health services. I think that would go a long way. Where we see the sequelae of mental health all the time. We see even with patients that are coming in for non-mental health related issues, how much their depression, anxiety can impact their ability to get better is tremendous. So that would be another one that we destigmatize it and offer it to all our citizens.
Wonderful.
Tough questions. Yeah, tough questions for sure.
So one of the last comments here is Jill is mentioning Hospice Care Ottawa is having virtual Homes for the Holidays tour. This is one of their big fundraisers, so please support that, or your local hospice or organization that means something to you. Giving Tuesday is next Tuesday, December 1st. So maybe think about that, because a lot of organizations have matching donations, and that might help support organizations working on social determinants of health or offering mental health support in our community. And what a great webinar, loved your passion, is the final comment. Wonderful. Well, thank you very much. We've learned a lot.
Thank you so much for having me. You guys I know a lot of people hustling, working hard in their hospice setting, long-term care setting. You know, you guys are making a difference. I could see from the comments there that that a lot of people doing their best to improve the care of our patients. So thank you, and thanks once again for inviting me. It's really is a privilege to be able to chat with all you guys.
Yeah, absolutely. That was a lot of fun.